Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know I recognise, thanks for that, Ray. I like that little wave. I recognise a few faces. I've been a speaker. I'm just trying to think. I think maybe this is the third time, Joe. I've been maybe three or four times
Yeah,
on this club conference sessions. So thank you so much for inviting me back again. Clearly, I might be doing something right, hopefully. Today, I'm going to talk about lower level concerns and I've been working with Jeanette around this presentation to hopefully it hits the mark for you as a organisation. So just to say a little bit about our team, so I work for the NSPCC, which is the children's charity, and not the dogs one, the one that works with the children. And we have got a specific team called the Child Protection and Sport Unit, and we've been around for about 25 years now. It was a partnership between the NSPCC and Sport England following allegations of sexual abuse happening within the sports sector. And Sport England felt at the time it wasn't just a one-off, it was possibly a pattern of behaviour that was happening and across multiple sports. And we've seen that, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those organisations throughout the session. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be able to describe, hopefully people will be able to describe what a lower level concern is at the end of the evening. We're going to think about what it looks like in your clubs, that lower level concerns and the procedures. But it's not just going to be specifically about children. So even though I work for a children's charity, one of the things that Jeanette has tasked me to do is to make sure that we're looking at all people within the organisation, because you not only safeguard children, you're safeguarding everybody, and that is adults as well. And that includes yourselves as well as volunteers within the sport, as well as your adult participants as well. Hopefully, we'll be able to provide you with some resources. Jeanette's been working on a lower level procedure, so hopefully that this is the start of that process around raising awareness of the lower level concerns, procedures, policy and procedure that Jeanette's being developed, and what that looks like within British Orienteering. We can't talk about safeguarding without making sure that we're looking after you. And I don't know what your lived experience is. And I'm just mindful of the fact that lots of people have been impacted by safeguarding, child protection, adult safeguarding concerns in their lives. And we want to make sure that you're okay, because if you're not okay, you can't possibly look after anybody else. So we're sharing these numbers with people just in case anybody is impacted by what we're going to talk about this evening. If anybody is impacted by it, please, turn your cameras off. Maybe reach out to Jeanette as well and get that support from Jeanette, because Jeanette will be able to signpost you as well to relevant organisations as well. We have got a video of somebody's lived experience of abuse within sport, and I'll let you know when we're about to play that, in case anybody does want to maybe mute that content if people have personally been impacted by abuse, whether something that's happened to them, maybe a family member, or maybe through work or volunteering experiences that people have been impacted by. So just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of these contact details. So we're just going to crack on now with what is a lower level concern. And one of the things for us, it is about making sure that we're listening to our inner self. So when you've got that little nagging doubt, you get that, it makes you feel like your stomach's turning. I don't know whether anybody's been in that situation before and you think, oh my gosh, that just did not feel right. It kind of had that sense of a nagging doubt, made you feel uneasy. And it doesn't matter how small that concern is, it is about somebody's behaviour that's maybe acting outside of your code of conduct, outside of the policies and procedures within British Orienteering. And it might not be something that's serious enough that meets what we would call a threshold, the level that statutory services like children's social care, adult social care, or the police would get involved in it. It's maybe at a more lower level. And it could be behaviours that are happening inside the sport, but could be behaviours that are also happening outside of the sport as well. And sometimes we call it also about poor practice or codes of conduct violations. But what the point is for us is we want to really stress with people. It's a lower level concern is not trivial, and they could be an indicator of risk or abuse or when something's gone wrong within an organisation. And what we really want to encourage is that people report all concerns in. So Jeanette would rather hear about too many concerns rather than not enough. She doesn't want things to get blocked at club level where maybe people haven't got the skills, the knowledge, the experience for dealing with safeguarding concerns. So no matter how small it is and you've got that sense of unease, share it with Jeanette, and then she can make a decision with you about whether it meets something that the NGB will pick up, or whether she would ask you to be able to support in managing that. And one of the things around lower level concerns is it might be that we're reporting ourselves because we've done something inadvertently or actually knowingly outside of the policy and procedure. And there might be a very good reason that we've done that, but it encourages people to be able to work and volunteer in an environment that's blame free. Because actually, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to create a culture where people feel safe to raise concerns and say, oh, I did this, and is that right? Is that operating in the procedures? Maybe it needs a little bit of support and education around that. So it is about getting that two-way dialogue where people don't hide things. We want people to be able to come forward and say, actually, I did this, and I'm not sure if that was right or not. And it encourages a dialogue, a learning culture where we all kind of go, actually, this is how we want to operate within our club. This is the safer environment that we would like to be able to have within our club environment. So I've already mentioned a little bit about what your organisation has in place. And one of the things that is it's got codes of conduct. And those codes of conduct is there for everybody. So it's there for children and young people. It should be there for our volunteers, our coaches, our staff, our club committee members. Everybody in the organisation or stakeholders should adhere to the codes of conduct. And it is about what our expected behaviours is. So it's your expected behaviours as being a member and a participant in the club, but it could be the expected behaviours because somebody's in a position of trust, they're a coach, or they sit on the club committees. So we're all governed by that. And it's a really helpful document. And I encourage everybody to be able to look at those codes of conduct and get familiar with them about what everybody's roles and responsibilities are. But one of the things about lower level concerns is if people start breaking those codes of conduct, it might indicate a pattern of behaviour or a pattern of codes of conduct violations. And that then means that is something that could be something more sinister. It could be that somebody doesn't know. They've not read the policies, procedures, they've not read the codes of conduct. It could be something that they've done it inadvertently. But what we want to do is we want to educate everybody, raise everybody's awareness about these documents because they're really useful documents to make sure that we all engage in our sporting activity in a way that's harmonious for each other. And one of the things, that pattern of behaviour, if somebody is breaching those codes of conduct, it might be you go, oh, well, it's the first time that's happened. But it might not be the first time that has actually happened. It might be the first time that you've seen it, but it might have been that Jeanette's seen it, that Greg's seen it, that Billy's seen it. And actually there's then a pattern of behaviour. So if everybody does report in and we have that culture where people do share concerns, then we might get to see if somebody's suitable to be in that club environment. And what we want to do is we want to be able to make sure that we've got an environment that puts the welfare of participants, the welfare of everybody within the club at the highest standard. And we want to create that safer culture where repeated poor practice, lower level concerns are addressed within the organisation. And some people might go, well, where's this come from? I've never heard of this kind of lower level concern stuff. It's been around for quite a while, and maybe we just called it different things. I think in the past we've called it poor practice. But one of the things that's been around for such a long time, so our team has been I think we've got 25-year anniversary this year for our team. But in 2004, we developed some standards, some safeguarding standards. And within that, we talked about poor practice, which has now evolved into different language. And the language that we might be using would be lower level concerns, poor practice. So it's been quite a while that we've had this this process in place. And then from 2004, we've had some really serious cases which have highlighted the need for organisations to be able to put in place mechanisms to be able to address lower level concerns, poor practices and indicators of risk. And one of the big ones was the Hugh Davis review that he did on a school teacher called William Vahey. And he was operating in private school, the international school in London, and also internationally as well. He was in Nicaragua, I think he was in the Middle East as well. And he was just a nasty individual who would sexually abuse children and young people, and just a vile person. And one of the things that came out of that Davis report was about within schools around having neutral report and neutral notification, so that it fostered a culture where people were able to raise concerns internally about, again, going back to that, things that sitting uneasy and just kind of made you feel a bit sick, or that pit of your stomach where you kind of go, oh, what was that I've just seen? And you're not quite sure, and you can't just quite put your finger on it because somebody moves away quite quickly, or does something that makes you question what somebody was up to. And then we've got keeping children safe in education, and in 2021. And again, that they were reinforcing about that neutral act, about promoting an open and transparent culture, having clear procedures for when we want to report lower level concerns, poor practice, or indicators of risk. And it was about making sure that everybody within the school, we had this learning culture. So if we got something wrong, it wasn't that people were berated for it and people then had a fear culture. It was actually about how do we create a learning culture where we all kind of be able to engage safely within this environment that we're working in. And again, in 2021, one of the key findings from the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, again, they were talking about neutral reporting as well. And I'll come on to that one in a minute. I've got a slide specifically for that. But in the same year as well, clearly 2021 was a busy year. The Scottish FA, they looked at their reviews into sexual abuse that was happening. So it happened within the English Football Association, but there was also quite significant concerns happening within Scotland as well. And one of the things that they found within their review was that the threshold between suspicion and concrete causes for concern were unclear, and sometimes it was obstructive. And what they were thinking was about people minimised and dismissed behaviours, whereas they should have been able to report those concerns and for those patterns of behaviour to be able to be identified earlier on, so that organisations, safeguarding teams could intervene quickly and early and to prevent any abuse and further harm from happening. And then in 2022, we had the White Review. And again, I've got a slide for that, but that was the review into British gymnastics. So I'll share that, the findings from that in a second. So this model, apologies for the really terrible fuzzy diagram, but this was it was a screenshot from a guy called Marcus Abruga. So he used to work for the NSPCC, and he's very well written in the space in terms of his knowledge and understanding around safeguarding. And what he developed this model of this slippery slope, and he talks about the fact of that there might be some initial boundary violations. So those breaches of codes of conduct would be a boundary violation. And he talked about the fact that once those boundaries have been eroded, is that people then find it hard to put in back in those professional boundaries. So even if we're volunteers in sport, we're still in a professional role. And he talked about the fact that the curve becomes steeper, and people then who have got a motivation to hurt other individuals, so they've got to already have that predisposition in there. That slippery slope becomes steeper, and the boundary violations happen because people are not challenged and people are not prevented from doing things that are not within the policies and procedures. And there's a lack of opportunities for people to raise concerns. It's not the culture within an organisation. And he talks about then that ends up becoming quite a steep, slippery slope that people then end up being able to be in an environment which is conducive to somebody who is predisposed can't even say that word now, predisposed to harm individuals. So it's not just something that happens, like abuse doesn't just happen as a one-off incident, I think is the whole point in this diagram. It's about constant chipping away at the boundaries that are put in place, and us as protective factors should be there to try and stop that and be boundary put in barriers to prevent people from creating harmful opportunities to abuse people. So just mention the White Review. And as I said, the White Review was the independent inquiry into abuses that was happening within gymnastics. And there were some key findings from that. And what they talked about was, it's a key aspect is about that reporting and reporting things early. And what we need to be doing is putting the welfare of participants, whether it be children or adults, at the heart of what we're doing. And if we've got them at the centre of what we're doing, then we'll get it right for ourselves as well. And that means that all the volunteers will be safeguarded themselves if they're putting the welfare of the participant first. And the other thing that Anne White talked about was about the failure to report, and it compromised the accurate reporting of and identifying patterns of behaviour. And that always comes back to, I'm going to be constantly talking about patterns of behaviours, and because it's really key. This is a key part of safeguarding, is about this early interventions and trying to prevent harm from happening. And one of the things that Anne White talked about was about people being able to recognise such conduct and take appropriate steps. So we need to be able to know what we're looking for. So I think in the past, when I've spoken to you, I might have talked about the 4 R's. So the first one's about being able to recognise that something's inappropriate and that we're able to respond appropriately when somebody's talking to us. And the third thing would be about being able to make that referral through. And then the fourth one would be about recording it, and whether that's you recording it or centrally Jeanette keeping records within the NGB as well. And that helps people then, when people move on, stop volunteering, maybe volunteer in a different role, people leave jobs and stuff, that organisational memory is still there, that regardless, people can just go back in the records and they can clearly see whether there's been a pattern of behaviour, of somebody's inappropriate behaviour. So I just mentioned before around the independent inquiry into child sexual abuses, and again that was a really interesting piece of work, and it spans many years. I think it was like 2015 through to 2022. So it was a massive piece of research that was done, and they listened to over 6,000 people around their experiences within multiple different sectors. So sport was one of them, faith sector, children's social care, children's homes being one of them, education was other sectors as well. And overall, out of all of the evidence that they heard over that 7-year period, is they talked about lots of missed opportunities. If I think about, content on our website, we've got various podcasts, and one of them is by a swimmer called Karen Leach, and she talked about the fact that people, when it did come out about her abuser, was that people then said, oh, I knew there was something not right, I knew he was up to something no good. So if people had listened to that in a sense of self, of kind of knowing something wasn't right, then Karen might have been saved and she might not have experienced that abuse. So it's really important that we raise those concerns earlier on, and we're not in an environment where we're missing those opportunities. And we do have that culture where people feel safe to be able to report them. Because one of the things that came out of the exit inquiries is that institutions allowed a culture and allowed informal contact and familiarity with children and young people, which enables individuals to be able to perpetrate their abuse and harm. And one of the things about sport is, and this is coming directly from the report, was about those informal interactions between children and adults were normalised, and their behaviours form part of the culture. And it was specifically within sport and leisure. And I think it's an interesting dynamic, I think, within the culture of sport. But we need to be making sure that we're safeguarding everybody and safeguarding ourselves by putting in appropriate boundaries to keep everybody safe. I'm going to show this video, and I'm going to just play a short section of a news report. So it's Dan Rowan interviewing Paul Stewart, who was someone who's got lived experience of abuse within sport. And as I said before, I don't know, people might have directly been impacted by abuse. So I'm just going to show a short clip from it. So if anybody feels that it's going to impact on them, just mute yourselves for a little bit, and we'll come back to you. If anybody needs any help and support, we can please reach out to Jeanette. But I'm just going to play this short clip for you around some of those violations that that were raised by the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse.
Well, I played for a Sunday league team, and the manager used to pick us up in his car because my parents didn't have a car, so to get to games he would pick us up. He would ask if anyone wanted to steer the steering wheel in them days. You would sit across the gear stick and he would then start touching you. And I guess dependent on your reaction was, way of who he was going to target. Then he would manipulate his way into your home by befriending you, while secretly starting to abuse you more and more, and then threatening you with, certainly in my case, he was threatening that he'd kill my parents and my two brothers if I thought about this. I did try to tell my parents.
I'm just going to stop it there. It's a longer, as you can see on the screen, a longer interview between Dan Rowan and Paul Stewart. And Paul's somebody that has worked with Child Protection Support Unit, many organisations, to try and encourage people to make sure that they've got robust safeguarding policies, procedures, the right people like club welfare officers in place, making sure that people get educated in safeguarding, because he wants to be able to change the landscape and make sure that children, all adults are safeguarded when they participate in sport. And I know that this is one of the more extreme sides of safeguarding, but I think it's really important that we understand why we're doing this. This is the big why, because what we want to do is prevent anybody else from getting hurt, and anybody using the vehicle of sport to perpetrate harm to any individuals, whether it be adults or children. So that's one of the reasons why I think that we need to go back to the big why, is we want to prevent harm from happening in the first place.
In my own.
So with that in mind, I know I've been talking at you for probably 15 minutes now, maybe 20 minutes. I just maybe want people to, people can come off mic, pop it in the chat, around, one of the things for me is about organisational culture. So we've just had, those various slides with different organisations, whether it be education, whether it be sport, children's homes, faith sector, about organisations almost at that point were enabling a culture of poor practice to be embedded. And just thinking about for yourselves, any thoughts about what you think that might also look like? So what type of small rule breaks do you think that individuals might do to be able to harm individuals, or might be a lower level concern or a poor practice or an indicator of risk. So I just, if anybody wants to pop any ideas into the chat, or unmute and just think about, what would be included from that side of things. It's quite a tough question, actually. Any thoughts from people? Hi, Anne. You can come off mute.
Hi, Lisa, are you talking about just sexual abuse, or are you talking about verbal abuse as well? I don't mean just sexual abuse, but verbal abuse as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to come on to that now, Anne, and I think that's a great question, because I think in obviously in those circumstances that we've just talked about, that was about sexual abuse. But one of the things that I didn't say was around the White Review, was wider than sexual abuse. In fact, there was not as many sexual abuse concerns that came out of it, even though that was initially started. The impetus for the White Review was following Athlete A. So I don't know whether you're seeing that documentary from the United States gymnastics team, where Larry Nessa was sexually abusing the athletes there, and that then caused almost like a bit of a tsunami within the UK about concerns that were happening in gymnastics, and that was mostly about emotional abuse, as you just said, Anne. So that, that kind of verbal abuse side of things. It also in the UK included things like body shaming, and fat shaming people. So there was massive concerns around that. There was concerns about overtraining. So it was more than sexual abuse, yes. And one of the things, though, for me about sexual abuse is you can't have sexual abuse without other types of abuse. So that emotional abuse will be part of it for sure. There might be some physical abuse as part of that, but definitely it covers more than just that, Anne. So thanks very much for raising that, because that's a lovely segue. I don't know whether there's anybody else that wants to unmute, or thanks, Nikki, for popping in the chat about shouting at children. Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the key things around going back to the gymnastics in the US, around that whole toxic environment and culture that was going on there as well. So that whole shouting at athletes, belittling athletes. So people didn't feel confident about being able to raise concerns, because it just created this environment where nobody wanted to share anything that was going wrong. Fab, thanks for that, David. Pressure to perform, yeah, and being alone, yeah. So being alone with children and young people. So great things there. Catherine's put about overly competitive parents. Yeah, that's a big one for us. Like, we have got a campaign called Keeping Your Child Safe in Sport, which is to help parents to understand the positive role that they should be playing for children and young people, and not putting over too much pressure onto children, because actually what we know is children just want to do sport because they love it and they enjoy it. Some of them might do it with that expectation or that aspiration to be a elite athlete, but most people just do sport because they enjoy it. Whether we're talking about kids or adults, we do it because we enjoy doing sport. And that's the bit for all of us, is about making sure that we haven't got that undue pressure within the sporting community. And I think that's the unique thing about sport as well, how people will use that that people's desires, particularly if we're thinking about elite, talented young people, that people can use that for their own gains. So Anne and David and Nikki and Catherine, you've just put us into a nice segue into that one. Hilary, you've just politely put your hands up. I love that. Thanks, Hilary.
I jotted down banter.
Yes.
Because I think banter can become bullying in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
I do know of an instance of that, and nothing was done.
Yeah,
So
that's really sad that nothing was done, Hilary. Because I think what we know that young people, and it doesn't even have to be young people,
that
actually,
was,
adults can be bullied.
yeah, this was not coach to athlete. This was athlete to athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, interestingly, me and Jeanette were talking about that before. So I've adapted the slides that we've got today to specifically look at some of that, because I think quite often we think about it being adult on child, and actually what we can see is child on child. Sometimes we can see child up to adult, but also we can see adult on adult as well. So whether it be somebody in a position of trust, it may be and to a member as well, so an adult member as well. So we've got a really good webinar on our website, Hilary, around the banter versus bullying, because I think within sport, again, this uniqueness about sport is that we let things go, because we just go, oh, that's just a bit of banter, that's just what we do in sport, it creates camaraderie and teammate and all of that stuff. And actually there's a clear distinction between what's banter and what's bullying. And I think we just need to call things out and not try and dress things up in something that they're not. So if it is bullying, we need to call out that behaviour and be positive bystanders and say that culture, that's not accepted in our club environment. We don't tolerate that type of behaviour. We want everybody to feel safe. We want everybody to be welcomed in this environment. Fantastic. Thanks for that, Hilary. Really great one. So we've started to move on already naturally, actually, by your engagement, which is perfect, around the fact of safeguarding is around taking steps to safeguard and protect everybody's well-being and promote it. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that we've got good mechanisms in place to prevent and respond whenever we've got some concern. So we've already started to think about that in terms of what's those poor practice lower level concerns. So Nikki talking about shouting at children, that pressure for people to perform, as David's saying, that overly competitive parent behaviour, and then we can have things like wider welfare issues and concerns that we might know about for an individual. So it could be an adult or a child. And then we're thinking about abuse and harm, and that is the stuff that we've already talked about in terms of emotional abuse and sexual abuse as well. And I'm just going to move us on, but just before I do that, like, things can move up and across the landscape as well. So something can start off as a lower level poor practice concern, which is an indicator of risk. It could be an indicator of risk. It could impact on somebody's emotional health and well-being. So that might be that wider welfare concerns. And it could end up becoming serious abuse and harm. So what does that look like? So if we were thinking about abuse and harm, we've got the 4 categories of abuse and harm for children and young people. So that's physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect. And there's also 4, and one of the reasons why the highlighted and bold is because those 4 are also in legislation for adults. So the Care Act, which is English centric, I don't know, we might have colleagues on the call from Wales and Scotland as well, and apologies because I don't know the legislation in those home nations, so I'm really sorry, because you'll probably have different legislation in those home nations. But definitely in England we've got 10 categories of harm in the Care Act for adults as well. So that would include financial abuse, discrimination, organisation, self-neglect, domestic abuse, coercive control, and modern slavery. So those are the categories of harm. But what I'd say is it doesn't really matter about what type of harm it is, because you don't need to worry about it. You just need to go, that's just not right. What I'm seeing, what I'm observing, what I'm hearing, I just need to report those concerns. Then if we're thinking about wider welfare issues, we've got a duty of care to put in, as that slide says there on the previous slide, is we need to prevent and respond to incidents. So one of the things that we can try and prevent is wider welfare issues and concerns. So one of the things that British Gymnastics have done, following the concerns within their organisation around eating disorders and disordered eating, is doing loads of guidance for their and education pieces with their coaches and with their athletes around hydration and nutrition. So they're trying to prevent that from happening. We know sport, Catherine put about overly competitive parents, putting that pressure. We know that there's pressure in sport, whether we're talking about doing county championships or international championships. We know that there's that emotional pressure. But also we need to be thinking about, somebody's physical health, somebody's mental health as well. So if we're thinking about maybe, I know your sport has a lot of what's the word that we use? Do we use the word seniors? Do we use the word, older people within the sport? I don't know. Some people have the veterans in some the Masters series, if we were, it depends on the sport that you're in. So apologies, I'm not familiar with the language that you use, but you might have older competitors, so 80-year-olds that are still participating fantastic in your sport. And I know that happens, but what's our duty of care to prevent them from maybe impacting on their own physical health and well-being? So do we need to have those conversations with people and making sure that they're competing at the right level for themselves? And then if we're thinking about those poor practice, lower level concerns, those indicators of risk, it could be as Hilary said about bullying, whether it be peer on peer, adult on adult, adult to child. We need to be aware of that, and we need to try and respond to it and prevent it from happening in the first place. It could be that people are using inappropriate language. So Nikki said about shouting at children. It could be that people are swearing at children. That's inappropriate. Or just swearing at anybody actually is just inappropriate anyway. It doesn't have to be a child. It could be that actually adults are offended by that. I know people in my team, when people swear, they're kind of not happy. So, every individual's different. So it's about us trying to put in those measures, those codes of conduct, again, coming back to that about how we're all going to work with each other as individuals. So building on those lower level concerns, those indicators, possible indicators of risk, here's a few things that that me and Jeanette worked on together in terms of we wanted it to be appropriate for your sport. So it could be some examples, are not an exhaustive list, but having favourites and excluding people. It could be that where people are taking images of children and not seeking appropriate consents, because there's clear consents that we need to be doing, and that all needs to be from a club perspective in line with your policies and procedures and with GDPR. It could be around those shouting, that sarcasm, that humiliating language that an individual might have, and that could be by an official, could be by a coach, it could be at an event, it could be at training. Those boundary violations, kind of having those sharing way too much about somebody's personal life, could be about private messaging, direct messaging to participants that is not appropriate for the role that individuals are in. Talked about swearing. It could be about having those interactions one-to-one from a child's perspective, but in a secluded place. And I think that that's quite a key thing within your sport. I've gone and done a course, I think I said about this last time with Peter, and I'm alone in the woods with Peter. It's a secluded place. That is your sport. For us to be really mindful of the context, the contextual environment that your sport takes place in. There will be opportunities where people might be alone in secluded places with children and young people, and we need to be thinking about what preventative measures we're putting in place to safeguard the volunteers and the children in that environment. It could be that inappropriate changing in public areas after a run could be a factor within your sport and physical activity. People just coming off wet, soaking wet, being for a run, and how do we get appropriately changed where we are You know, for you, people might kind of go, oh, okay, I've just done this for 25 years, 30 years, just get changed in the car park or whatever, because there's no clubhouse to get changed in. But actually other people might be impacted by that, and it's how it's seen by other people as well, and would this be breaching of your policies and procedures and codes of conduct. But ultimately, if we're unsure about somebody's behaviours, we just need to share it with Jeanette and have that conversation. And something might get done about it, might not do, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So I've got a couple of slides, and then I've got a little bit more interaction with you. So in terms of appropriate conduct for an individual, it's about behaviour which is consistent with your policies, procedures, your codes of conduct and the law. So that would be a green light type of behaviour. If we are thinking about amber level behaviour, so that could be, you know, that again, that lower level concerns, risk indicators of risk, poor practice, and it could be that it doesn't meet the threshold for a child protection and adult protection intervention, but it could be thresholds that is, you know, giving you cause for concern, just makes you a little bit worried. I'm just not sure about what that individual did, that nagging doubt. They've definitely breached the codes of conduct, and it could be conduct that's outside of the sport as well. So that would be an amber light. And then if we were thinking about a child or adult protection issue, these are about, you know, behaviours that an individual does that they've either done something that's harmed a children or may have harmed a child. So it could even be the may. It might not have been that they've actually done it. We don't have to be 100% sure. It's not for us to determine that. It would be statutory agencies that would do the investigations. They've maybe committed a crime that has harmed a person. So that could be a physical assault on an individual. It could be a sexual assault on somebody, something that it could be domestic abuse, domestic violence on an individual, brings into question somebody's suitability to be in that club environment. And it might be that they pose a risk to others, and it could be that actually they're just probably not suitable to be in our club environment. So we've got those 3 traffic lights there. So I think it's probably quite self-explanatory. So I've got a couple of quick fire scenarios, and I just want you to put in the chat whether you think it's red, amber or green. So it's very simple. So the first one is an 80, and the very, very limited information. This is the way that we always do it. But we have an 85-year-old whose physical and mental health is deteriorating. So going back to the 3 bubbles, we had abuse, welfare and lower level concerns, risk indicators. What would we put that as? Do we think that that's a red, amber or green? So just pop that in the chat. What would you think that is? I'll just give people a little second to do that. Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody. Caroline, Helen, Jenny, Alan, thank you so much. Thanks for that, Alan. So Alan's put about amber. I think everybody's put amber in there and put danger of injury. Yeah, so, you know, don't want to stop people from doing sport and physical activity. I think it's fantastic. But do we need to consider about capabilities and making sure it's the right level of course for that person's capabilities? I can see somebody's got the hand up. Anne Harris. Hi, Anne. Oh, you're on mute, Anne. Oh, can you? Oh, there you go, Anne.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, my chat's not working. I can't put anything in my chat.
Oh,
That's
don't
all.
worry.
But
Oh,
I would
don't
have
worry.
put amber. Yes.
You would have put amber. Brilliant.
put
Thanks for that,
yeah.
Anne. Yeah, and I think it's fantastic that people want to do sport, and we would really encourage that because you know, it gives us longevity. It's really good for us, good for our socialization, our stimulation, physical well-being. But we just need to think about our duty of care towards that individual and making sure that we're matching up the course that they're doing with their level of capabilities. I can see somebody else has put their hand up. If you want to come off mute, well, I'll try and find out. Is that you, Emma? Thanks, Emma.
It is, yeah. So no, it's interesting because actually we have had sort of that kind of issue within our region. And it's interesting that you say like sort of offering a course that's suitable, but it's really hard when that individual won't accept that they are struggling. And yeah, I mean, fortunately, there's an issue which has been now dealt with, I believe, but it's a really difficult situation because once an older person maybe has got deteriorating mental health or is becoming a little bit confused and whatever, they don't recognise that that's an issue.
I know.
Yeah, so it was just it's tricky really, because yes, we can put safeguarding in place and that has been attempted, but with an awful lot of resistance from the individual.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Emma. I hear you. My mum's got dementia. Trying to have those conversations with a very headstrong Scouse woman about capabilities is really difficult, isn't it? And I think it's about who's the best person in the club to be able to support and have that really sensitive conversation with an individual. And maybe it's a case of, do we, not to sound too official, but kind of put a risk assessment in around actually somebody goes with them to make sure if it's a possibility, you'd volunteer-led organisation. So I think it's about how we sensitively have those conversations, but we've still got a duty of care. And if we know somebody's got dementia and we're sending them out, not sending them out, but they're going out into the woods. And we know this. So
some of the sort of safeguards that were put in place were things like that they had to start early. So obviously start times are normally over an hour or 2 hour period. So they had to start early and they were requested to carry a mobile phone and that the organizer was to know the number and all that sort of stuff. So, so safeguards have been put in place, but it's just very difficult when that individual doesn't actually recognise that there's an issue.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, the big thing is about having a signal in the middle of the woods.
Well,
But I love the fact that you've tried to be flexible. And the thing for me is about safeguards. It's about mitigating risk, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're not trying to 100% eliminate all risk because we're never going to be able to.
Absolutely.
But what we can do is we just try and reduce that likelihood of things to take place. And I think, Alan's asking questions around rules of the game. I think we need to be flexible in certain circumstances. We're talking about a club activity rather than the Olympic Games. Let's be proportionate. If it keeps somebody safe, then maybe we kind of need to go. This is not, somebody trying to cheat. This is just us trying to keep somebody safe and still active. So fantastic, great conversation around that one. Thank you. Next one, and apologies. Oh yeah, there you go. That fantastic. A coach escorts a child to St. John ambulances because they've got injured. I forgot to put that on there. On their own through the woods. What are your thoughts on that one? Not as clear cut, maybe. So red, amber, or green. And I just let people respond to that one. Give people. I think we might get some mixed reviews here on this one. I don't think it's not as black and white. This one. Yeah, so we've got some greens, got some ambers. Anybody want to quickly come off mute and say why they gave it the colour that they gave it? Any thoughts from people? Thanks, Alan.
Well, I mean, part of your bit is what's your alternative? You've got an injured child. You've got an injured child on a cold, wet day.
Yeah.
Is the coach going to say, well, I'm going to stay 12 foot away from you and you're just going to have to sit there for the next half hour whilst we see if someone can come?
Yeah.
You're actually doing definite harm as against maybe.
Yeah. Love it, Alan. Very clear cut. That's your rationale. Brilliant. And I think for me, it'll probably be, you know, going outside of the policy, which would be about not being alone with a child. But at that moment, Alan, what we're prioritising is the physical well-being of that child, and we're making sure that they get the emergency help that they need at that particular point. And what I would do in that circumstances, and I've had it when I've organised games in the past, is people have just said, Liza, as the safeguarding lead, I'm letting you know that the child was injured. I had to take them to St John Ambulance on my own. Perfect, fantastic. So we've had that conversation just to let people know, because if other people seeing that, so say if that child, I don't know, was a wrist, for example, they'd fallen over, hurt the wrist, somebody might see the fact that the child's walking normally, I'm escorting them, for example, somewhere down the woods, that people might be going, why are they going that way? That's not the route. And people might look at that in a way that going, oh, that they shouldn't be doing that. But actually, there's a very, very valid reason why I'm doing it. As you said, Alan, so eloquently, we've got to make sure that that child gets that emergency help. So what I'm saying is, yes, do that. Do it on your own. If in that circumstances, that's the only way to do it, to make sure that that child gets that emergency treatment, just let the safeguarding lead, the welfare lead know that that's why you were there on your own, because somebody might see it and go, why was Liza on her own with that child? Very weird, very dodgy. So just some things to think about. And that's that neutral act of reporting, which creates that culture where people feel safe and secure to be able to raise concerns. Okay, so I'm going to quickly move on for this, because I you know, as you all know, it's my favourite subject to talk about safeguarding in sport. So I'll try and whiz through a few more. So an adult member reports they are being bullied online by the club chair. Right, we've got some ambers and reds. And we've got a green in there. Fantastic. Everybody's being able to participate in that. I think that comes back to the culture. So if people are feeling bullied, then there needs to be a process for being able to respond appropriately to it. So making sure that we haven't got that banter, bullying versus bullying situation. If people genuinely feeling that they're being bullied, that's having an impact on somebody's emotional health and well-being, and we need to address that because we want to create a safer culture. So okay, I'm just looking to see, there's a couple more, but I'm conscious of time as well, and I don't want to take up Billy's slot too much. Okay, so I'm going to go with an adult participant pushes the child out of their way during a race. Red, amber, or green? A lot of people's thoughts on that one. I think I've got some ambers coming in.
I think pushing anybody out the way isn't bad, isn't it? Whatever it is, and it might not be as a. It's just not sporting, is it?
It's not. Is that you, Anne?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
I'd forgotten to turn the microphone off.
Hi, man. This is Jeanette.
No, come on.
I just think it's not sporting, and you shouldn't be doing it to anybody. And it might not be that it's directed against a person personally. You know, so we've seen it being done somewhere. We reported it, didn't we?
Yeah, reported it to the club chair.
It was, yeah, in a park. It was an urban event, and it pushed this girl over and hurt her shoulder. Actually, and she was with her dad, and it got reported.
Yeah, but there was that
was the competitor, was it?
Yeah, there is some adult on adult pushing as well.
Yeah. And but I don't think it's. I know I say it shouldn't be done as a personal thing. It's not, is it? But it shouldn't be done at all. Whoever it's against.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. And Jeanette, is it your organisation that's got a kindness policy? Was that you, or was that another sport I was working with today?
No, we do. We have a be kind policy. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that's true.
I love that. I was just like, today I went, that's warm my heart, a kindness policy. I think the world would be a better place if better place if we all did a bit more kindness. So yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's not acceptable for anybody to be pushing anybody over. You know, we're supposed to be doing sport that we enjoy and we love, and you know, it's not the Olympic Games. And even in the Olympic Games, you get kicked out, you lose your medal if you're pushing people over. And depending on what sport you're in, you kind of would be an infringement. Fantastic. Thank you so much for doing that. I am conscious of time, so I'll just whiz through. These are some things that Jeanette had in around different levels. So Jeanette's got you know, thresholds, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And we had an interesting conversation around a potential abduction, and that was always one of my concerns to Peter, walking around the woods with Peter. He was very brave walking around the woods with me, but around, you know, very seriously, you know, it can be secluded places, and you know, how do we make sure that everybody's accounted for at the end of the session, and making sure that we've got processes in place if we've got concerns or worries that somebody hasn't come back, and we're able to initiate them straight away, because it could be the lost, but for children's perspective, it could be that somebody's tried to abduct them. If any of you are interested in this topic, there is a great guidance that was written by some solicitors that work in the sports sector. So Sport England, I've commissioned them to do lots of pieces of work within the sector, and they've developed this really great guide for implementing lower level concerns, and it is obviously linked to children, but for me, I think the principles of the, you know, are the same. So, you know, behaviors that, you know, some of the stuff, the language that we used before, behaviors in a way that's harmed an individual, that's inappropriate. Behaviors that an individual poses a risk. Again, it's appropriate whether we're talking about adults or we're talking about children and young people. So if anybody's interested, when you get the slides, you can click on that link and it'll give you more information. One of the good things about this guidance is, I thought, was this handy little diagram. And as I mentioned this before, is that one of the reasons why we talk about recording patterns of behaviour, inappropriate behaviour, is because it might have been that I seen it happen, Jeanette might have seen it happen, Billy might have seen it happen, Anne might have seen it happen, Alan might have seen it happen. For all of us, it might have just been it happened once, but actually that's showing a pattern of inappropriate behaviour. So they use this timeline as a way to be able to show, actually, over a period of time, there's lots of things that have happened, lots of inappropriate behaviours that have happened, and actually we need to manage that situation. I mean, I need to put in some appropriate interventions to safeguard the participants within your organisation. So just moving us on a bit. One of the things for me is sometimes concerns can be that an individual has not read the policies and procedures, and it could be that they've just done it out the goodness of the heart. For example, you know, quite often we talk about people giving lifts home to children, you know, parents not able to pick up the kids, and you know, they phoned up and said, I'm not able to come and get them, you know, I've been held up at work, or there's been an accident on the motorway and I'm stuck, blah 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 blah. And people then, you know, would, kindness of their heart, just go, oh yeah, I'll just drop them off, it's on my way home. But not thinking about the implications of that. And we can put in some mitigations as well for that, if that situation happens. And we know sometimes it happens, and there's policies and procedures from British Orienteering, so I'm just using that as an example. But if we're thinking about this slide, you know, if we're thinking about, you know, maybe bullying behaviour, because we've talked about that before, so maybe bullying behaviour between participants, it could be like thoughtlessness, that an individual's not thought about their behaviour, and actually it ends up being some bullying type of behaviour. But coach maybe sees it, or a member of leadership within a club sees it, and they don't want to make a big deal out of it. They kind of don't want to spotlight the child. But what then happens is, it kind of could be that somebody's by not being a positive bystander and not tackling that particular inappropriate situation in that particular instance might end up ultimately leading to maybe more harm happen, more abuse happen, more serious bullying from happening. So we've just got to be alert to that happening, really, is that actually the reasons we have this lower level concerns, indicators of risk, is because we want to prevent further harm from happening. So just thinking for yourselves really about if you were going to get concerns raised, whether it be, you know, abuse and harm, wider welfare concerns, poor practice, lower level concerns, indicators of risk, who might that come from? Where might that come from? So any thoughts about where it might come from? So how you might find out about it as being a member of a, you know, the club structures. So just pop that in the chat, that'll be lovely. Any thoughts from people? Okay, I'm just going to reveal it. So it could be that we've got suspicions and we've seen something. It could be that you receive a complaint from a child, a parent, from an adult within the organisation, and it could be an adult from outside of the organisation as well. So concerns come from multiple different avenues, and we've just got to be making sure that we're responding appropriately to that. And for me, if we're thinking about creating a safer environment, we've got to create that safer culture. And as part of that, there's multiple different things. So sometimes I hear people say, oh yeah, I do safeguarding. We do a DBS check or a PVG check. And that's that safer recruitment bit. But what I was talking about, the jigsaw puzzle, is around, it's just one part of safer recruitment, and it's just one thing that we can do in our safeguarding toolkit. So it will, you know, it's a really important part. It's a very proactive thing that we can do, but there's lots of other things that make up the jigsaw puzzle to make things safer for individuals. And that could be around whistleblowing, equality and diversity. It could be about having regular check-ins with our volunteers, making sure that everything's all right. It could be about staffing or volunteer induction and training of volunteers. Jeanette, you've got quite you've got a package, haven't you? British Orienteering have got a package of training that you offer for your volunteers within the organisation. I don't know, it might be a good opportunity just to highlight them.
Okay, and actually this was one of the questions that did come in ahead of tonight. So obviously British Orienteering is keen to deliver safeguarding training, and we've got specific training for coaches and for the club welfare officers. But we also, for the event officials and club members, we've got the e-learning module, which covers basic safeguarding elements and really focuses on how to identify a concern and to confidently report it on. We are asking actually for it to be promoted across all of the clubs to everyone, because safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. I know that one of the questions that came in, sorry, if I can just answer that now, was about volunteers and it being too onerous for the volunteers. And I know there is a concern that it could put them off, but you know, we see it as another layer of protection, both for the individuals that are reporting the concerns, but also for the volunteers themselves. And I think it's important to remember, and Caroline's just put in the chat that you often report, or concerns are often reported to the organiser or the download operator. As soon as you're putting yourself out there as a volunteer, you're kind of holding yourself up as somebody who could be trusted. So people are more likely to report into you. So the training really is to protect you as well as the person that might be reporting the concern.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Jeanette. Yeah, no, brilliant. Is there a place on the website where people can go to find out different types of training?
You can link to it from the safeguarding pages. It is quite easy to find, I think.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Jeanette. Okay, So moving swiftly on, this is a whistle stop short tour. I should have said this as like I'm literally gonna rattle through everything. One of the things for us is about being proportionate. And if we decide that something was a lower level concern, it's a pattern of behaviour, inappropriate practice, indicator of risk. It could be that there's 1 of 5 things that happens within an organisation. So it might be that there's no further action because actually the person just, it was okay. As we said before, Alan, taking the kids to the first aid tent, it's fine. It was not a lower level concern. It was the right thing to do. It could be that we've got managed guidance and we're supporting that individual to maybe understand a bit more about policies and procedures. Could be that that individual goes on training because they maybe weren't aware of the safeguarding requirements. Could be that there's maybe a discussion, and part of that discussion might be a bit of mentoring maybe with another coach. It could be that the organisation decides that it's serious enough that it meets the disciplinary and grievance procedures, and that individual will maybe potentially would go through that process. So that's kind of the actions that could be taken if a lower level concern was raised. And I think about it in these 3 ways, really, in terms of it is like we've got values and expected behaviours from the organisation. And within that, we've got boundaries, our professional boundaries. Even if we're a volunteer, we should still have professional boundaries. And then we've got those policies and procedures that help and enable and empower our volunteers, our staff, our participants, our children, our parents to be able to raise concerns and question whether practice was appropriate or not. And one of the things that, as British Orienteering and Jeanette's been really hard working on is about addressing that particular area, because it was a gap within the organisation. And one of the things that she wanted to do was to make sure that that was firmed up and that people know that no matter how small the concern is, that you've got an opportunity to be able to share that concern and get that right support, and that it's sensitively dealt with and responded to proportionately and appropriately in a timely manner. So Jeanette, over to you, because you've got a couple of slides for you to talk about your about the guidance that you develop, because this is one of a series of things that you're going to be doing around raising the awareness.
Yep, that's right. So as we've said, the lower levels concern policy is now on the website, and it's now a policy that we're pushing out. And this is a slide from the actual policy. So you can see at level 1, we've got our lower level concerns right through to level 2, which is moderate concerns, and level 3, which are your serious concerns. And safeguarding and welfare runs through all of those levels. And really, while some of the lower level concerns might be managed at the club level, if the welfare officer is comfortable to do so, we are here to help and to guide. So please do reach out, and you can see there, you've got my telephone number or email, or you can, if you're more comfortable, report it through the incident reporting form. So whether you deal with it with the club welfare officer or whether you reach out for guidance, either way, we do want you to report them in to us. And part of that, along with the trend analysis on identifying issues, it also helps us realise where the gaps are in our guidance. So, for example, the dementia policy that we're going to hopefully be issuing soon, that's come about because we've had 2 or 3 lower level concerns reported into us on members that are facing those challenges.
Fantastic.
The next slide, is that all?
Yep.
So that's really going over the responsibilities of the club welfare officers. But anybody that's got a concern at club level, you're encouraged to pass them on to your welfare officer, and then for them to reach out to us for guidance. Or if you're not comfortable going to your club welfare officer, or you don't know who they are, come to me as well. Like that's absolutely fine. You don't have to go through them. The key points is, if you are receiving a concern, obviously to deal with it in a confidential manner and to be empathetic. We don't want you to just dismiss it or be judgmental. We want to hear about them. We recognise it's a new policy and it is going to take time to embed. So for now, the message is to to come to us, and we'll help you. We'll guide you through it. And I think that's it, really. It's just really to say that, you know, we've got to, it's something that we're keen to do, and we want to help you do it.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Jeanette. I'm going to finish up now, and I'm just going to talk just to recap really in terms of Marcus Aruga. You know, just talking about early identification of possible potential problems. It addresses concerns really early on and provides that route for people to know what to do if we've got concerns at that lower level risk indicator level. And it also helps an organisation to create that safer culture. And what we want to do is for everybody to see that safeguarding's everybody's responsibility, and any concerns that you've got, no matter how small, how big, share them with Jeanette. Have that conversation. Jeanette would rather know about it than not know about it, and she's there to help and support and guide you and give you assistance in any safeguarding matters, whether we're talking about children or whether we're talking about adults as well. So, Billy, you're going to talk to us about how the sport welfare officers can help and support the network, the British Orienteering network.
Absolutely. Hi everyone. Many thanks for having me on this evening. I won't keep you too long, but thanks, Liza, for that information. I was taking some notes as you went along that I could try to link into some of the bits that I was going to say, and I was just going to add on to the end of that. I remember being told at one point, if you have like a concern, any kind of concern, think of it like a hot potato. You don't want to keep that in your hands for too long because you're going to get burnt. Yeah, if you get that information or you have something that you identify or you think is wrong, you want to pass that information on as soon as possible. So that's where Jeanette is there to be able to help, and yeah, don't get your hands burnt. But just to say to people are thinking, who is this guy that's suddenly talking to us? My name's Billy Ketman. I actually work for, you can see here I'm a sport welfare officer. Across the country, there are people in this role of sport welfare officers who are in place to essentially help grassroots clubs, national governing bodies like British Orienteering, sort of just be an extra sort of point of contact really, in terms of if any sort of help or guidance or advice is needed. We exist all over the country, so I work, you can probably recognise by my voice, I feel like I'm representing the South today as well. I'm based in London. I work for an organisation called London Sport, but equally there are my equivalents across the country. And Liza mentioned how there was that review into gymnastics called the White Review. Is actually because of that review that identified sort of that there are sort of there were poor practices and abuses taking place in gymnastics. There's been a lot of funding by National Lottery and Sport England to create these roles that I'm in, called these sport welfare officer roles. We have a lot of experience. In my background, for example, I was one of the safeguarding managers at the Football Association, where I was for 8 years and was previously a social worker. So people in our roles, we've got sort of good knowledge and awareness and experience. And if we're okay, just to go on to the next slide, Liza, I'm not sure if it's you that's got control of it. So essentially, what we're not anywhere that people should be reporting concerns to. We're not anywhere that people should be looking to let us know about something that's happened. That's for Jeanette and British Orienteering. But essentially, we're here to sort of support with sort of general advice. Quite a lot. One of the things that we sort of focus on is helping clubs to sort of improve or to build positive cultures. Clubs where people feel safe, people feel welcome, people can give feedback about their clubs, knowing that actually they're not going to be shouted at or sort of be seen negatively. Because actually, the more positive a culture a club has, it's sort of the logic is that, and that actually there are then going to be fewer sort of lower level concerns that are raised, because actually everyone knows their roles at the club, everyone knows their expectations, everyone knows the values of this club. So that's essentially what we do. I actually have recently taken on a role at British Orienteering. It's sort of in a voluntary capacity, sort of one of the safeguarding Jeanette will correct me if I get the terminology wrong, but I think I'm on the safeguarding and welfare advisory group, and one of the sort of case management panel members. And as you can see here, I've got an example of what things we can help with. We can answer welfare questions. We can help with policies, procedures. We can come out and visit your clubs. Sometimes just having a neutral pair of eyes coming out to a club and just seeing how you guys might operate. We might be able to give some feedback about, oh, have you tried, doing this, or actually, have you, thought about sort of promoting a bit better who your club welfare officers are, or making that sort of literature a bit clearer on your website or Facebook pages. As sport welfare officers, we also provide bits of training and learning. So, for example, recently I've been doing a lot of work around sort of neurodiversity. There might be people on the call that have heard about this term, or or people that are more experienced about that kind of term. So actually, you might have people joining your clubs that maybe have conditions like ADHD or autism and things like that. And actually, there might be times where you think, actually, it'd be really useful for our club to actually have someone come in and tell us a bit more about this, because actually then we can, if we do have people joining our clubs that have some of these sort of neurodivergencies, then actually we know how to help them as well as we can, and make them feel welcome and know what some of the challenges that they're going to face. So essentially, and another thing we can do, I've been offering quite a lot of help around things like funding. A lot of clubs are always sort of desperate for funding, and actually we can help sort of advise and signpost clubs about where to go for funding, and actually give advice for clubs to know that, if your safeguarding and welfare policies and procedures at your club look good, you're going to be more appealing to a funder to potentially want to donate money to your club, because actually then they're not putting their sort of brand or reputation at risk. I've just written myself a couple of notes before I end, but there's a link. Jeanette, I'm not sure if you're going to send the slides out afterwards or anything, but there's a link if people think, oh, actually, I wouldn't mind just sort of finding out who my local sport welfare officer is. There's a link to do that. We always want people to make contact with us. It's never a hassle when people make contact with us. We're paid to help. We're paid to sort of, if people want to have a chat about anything really that's going on at their club, we can just be that sort of first point of call somewhere, sometimes to help there. And I was just going to say, I was going to do a bit of a plug as well. So I said I worked for London Sport, and we've actually got a whole week of sessions coming up in a couple of weeks that are free for anyone to attend. Lots of online sessions, a couple of in-person sessions around sort of creating safe and inclusive environments. I'm running a session about sort of how clubs can help to build those sort of positive cultures at their clubs. We've actually got an ex-GB gymnast come in to talk to us about sort of her experiences, and so that'll be really interesting. And also we're doing a session about how to talk to your teenagers about safeguarding and sport. And I know that's something that came up in sort of in Liza's presentation. So I'll put a link in to Jeanette, who can maybe send that out in an email. But that's it really. I've sort of waffled on for a few minutes, but there are these people out there that would love to hear from you, would love to come and meet you at your clubs and just be that extra person that you might want to go to if you've got something that's going on and it doesn't quite it's not a low level concern, it doesn't warrant getting in contact with Jeanette to sort of report something, but you just think, well, actually I wouldn't mind getting a bit of help or advice around this, then we're always happy to help. And yeah, it's lovely to be part of the British Orienteering family. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Billy. That's all of us done for this evening. We've got 5 minutes left, Joe. Look at me finishing, even with guest cameo appearances from Jeanette and Billy, that we've finished ahead of schedule and enough time for a question or two.
Hats off to you, Liza. And yep, straight away Keith's in with a hand up, so go for it, Keith.
I love that.
you'd like to pop yourself off mute.
That's better now. There's several demute buttons on here. I'll find the right one. It's really a question for Jeanette. It's a very simple one, Jeanette. My practice is to give enquiries or registration at every event of various forms. Previously, so I haven't checked it tonight, the incident form is online only form, I think. It's not a printable version. And I really would like to leave that at enquiries for events because, as someone said, they're the first point of call for people reporting things.
Yeah, I think we did take the links down online, but if you would like a copy of them, I can certainly email you a copy to the Word version.
That would be great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
But it is worth putting it. Just check. I may not have searched the site correctly, but it really could do with being downloadable.
Yeah, I will put a link on. No problem.
Brilliant. And Alan's asking for the URL for the lower level concern. So, is the policy ready to go on the website, Jeanette?
It should be live now. I tried to do it before we jumped on this. I will try and put it on.
Fantastic, thank you. And I suppose this is a first in a series of communication from British Orienteering around this new approach for the organisation. So hopefully people will hear a lot more about lower level concerns over the coming months. I can see Jeanette is busy grabbing that link. No, I love it. There's Jeanette's great thinking face. Any other questions from people? I don't know whether anybody put anything in the Q&A, Joe.
I am checking. The Q&A has remained quiet, which means people have either been able to use the chat or ask you the questions, which is very good. And Jeanette's just put that link in the chat.
I have. There was a question that came through quite late about sharing transport with if you're a coach and you're transporting juniors, and if you're a club member and transporting juniors, and the guidance around that. British Orienteering doesn't have at the moment specific guidance on it, but I have put the link to the CPSU guidance on the British Orienteering website on the safeguarding pages. And I was chatting to Liza about it earlier, and we were saying that it's definitely something that we're not saying no to, because we know that it would kill off grassroots sport if we said that coaches couldn't do that. But as Liza was saying, it's about putting the mitigating fact, like it's a risk, so risk assessing it, and what can we do to mitigate the risk. So have a look at the guidance, and if you've got any more questions, then please do come back to me.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for Jeanette for giving that.
Oh, you put it in the chat as well, right?
Yeah, put it in the chat as well. Yeah, I think we were just talking about the fact of, like, you know, it'd be great if we can get parents to take that responsibility, but it's not always possible for people to do that and transport other children, do carpooling with other parents and stuff, because I think as coaches you've got a different role, and you know your role's becoming bigger then, because now you're supervising for a longer periods of time. As we heard from Paul Stewart, there's potential for people to misconstrue it, but there's also potential for people to abuse that position. So we've talked about the fact of, like, if you're going to do that, put those mitigations in place. So one of them might be that you pick a parent and another parent up with 3 kids, you're all in the car together, you'd all get picked up at the same time from the one location. It's not one person being alone in a car with one child. If you have to do it in an emergency situation, one of the things that I would do if I had to do that was I'd be driver, child was being in the back over the other side, they'd be on the phone to the parent all the way home, and we'd be having that conversation. I'd also be letting my club welfare officer know that I had to do that in an emergency situation in case somebody's seen it, misconstrued that act of kindness and that actual essential thing to make sure that that child got home safely in that emergency situation. So I think there's things that people can do to consider the risks and try and mitigate the risks. you know, I think it puts people in a vulnerable position for doing that, but we're not saying you can't ever do it. I think it's just about thinking about it and thinking about it logically and risk assessing that intervention and mitigating. Was there any other questions? Because hopefully, Jeanette, you did a bit of a survey out and you asked people in advance. Hopefully we've answered all the questions that people asked in preparation of the session. We will be sharing the slides. So Jeanette and Joe, I'll ping them over to you now. But I don't know whether there's any other questions, Joe.
I think it might be all quiet unless something pops up in the chat or a hand goes up towards the end. So you might be just about off the hook.
Excellent. It's been lovely as ever to be with the British Orienteering community. And if nobody's got any other questions, then we'll let you go, I think, isn't it, Joe?
Yeah, I'll do my a couple of quick shameless plugs for next week's sessions. I want them truly as shameless because I'll be presenting on it. So first of all, I'll just go in full order. So a huge thank you to yourself, Liza, Jeanette, and Billy. Brilliant to have you all on. It's really, it's really good to just see how much work is going on, how much we are doing at British Orienteering, and also that from the insights that you've given us as well, the members, from all the good work that you're doing as well. It's been an absolute treat, and there is a reason why we keep on asking you back, Liza, and I think it shows. Always so much engagement in the chat during the session, and it's been an absolute pleasure. In terms of next week's sessions, we have the aforementioned first session where I will be making an appearance, and that is the update from the Safety Advisory Group for 2026, covering incident reporting, learning, and incident reporting culture as well, and a bit on dynamic risk assessments. So I feel like I may see a couple of faces here on there as well. Safety and safeguarding working in partnership. There's also another one on Tuesday, which is creating engaging experiences beyond the event, crafting experiences that captivate. So hopefully the content of the session will live up to the long title, and that'll be presented by British Orienteering's very own Kay Hawke as well. I won't keep anybody else for too much long, but a huge thank you all for attending this evening. It's been really good to see just how well everything's going, and it's been a pleasure to have everybody. So thank you very much all again, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye-bye.